Hi, in this video I'm going to be reviewing our Volkswagen e-Golf after 2 years of ownership and 22,000 miles. I'm going to share with you the bits we love, also the bits we don't love, what it's like to live with on a day-to-day basis, and why, even though it's lease finished last year, it's still parked on our drive outside. Let's get cracking. Let's start with the things we love. So number one is the way it looks. In 2019, my wife was keen to get an EV, but she didn't want an out there looking vehicle. And the e-Golf, apart from some subtle badges, just looks like a normal Golf. The next thing we love about the car is that it's fun to drive, and I mean really fun to drive. It's by no means a Tesla with its performance, but VW have really managed to get this driving profile right. It's eager, it's nippy, it's good round the corners. Whenever I get in this car, I smile, which I don't get with other cars all the time, including my Tesla. The next thing we love are the running costs. So we had this car on a 2-year deal. It was £230 a month. There was no road tax to pay. The insurance was comparable to a normal Golf, and the servicing costs were about half. To make it even better and even cheaper, the fuel cost works out to be about £22 per 1,000 miles driven, and that's if we charge it at home. So with the price of fuel as it is, I mean, we love it even more. £22 of home charging costs for 1,000 miles driven. I'll put more details of that here, and I'll also link to that video at the end of this video. It's worth noting that prices have increased a little bit since I made that video, and it's £22 per 1,000 miles now, and not the £15 I quoted then. The next thing we love is the build quality. A Volkswagen e-Golf is kind of mid-range, mid-luxury level comfort. In 2 years, 22,000 miles, we've not had one issue with the car. It's had a couple of small altercations with hard objects, but by no means the car's fault. It's just been rock solid. I would say it's probably the most reliable new car we've ever owned. Also like the spec of the car. So we went for the bottom spec car. We just wanted a cheap second car to have in the family, but it's really well spec'd. It's got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It's got adaptive cruise control. The adaptive cruise control is as good as the one on my Tesla. It's also got a heated front windscreen, which you don't get on many cars, do you? And it's also got heated mirrors. So don't be put off by getting the bottom spec car. Compared to its petrol and diesel equivalent, I know the electric one is more expensive to buy, but you do get a really good spec level compared to the bottom level of those cars. The next thing we love is that we never get into a hot or a cold car. So my wife leaves at 8 AM every morning, or Monday to Friday, and that's programmed into the car. And what the car does is it uses electricity from the house to heat the car up, so it doesn't use its own battery. And then when she finishes work later on in the day, the car is warm or cool then, because at that point it knows she's leaving and it uses the car's battery to heat or cool the car. If we're at the gym or in a coffee shop or a restaurant, before we leave, we can just open the app when it's working. Now that's one downside, the app's not the best that comes with the car, but we can open the app and we can turn the air conditioning on, and it's just, unless you've got this, unless you've had this, you don't really appreciate it. When it's like -5 and all of our neighbours are scraping their really expensive cars and we're eating our breakfast and the car's defrosting itself on the driveway, you just can't beat that. Lastly, one of the other things we really love about this car is B mode. So the car's got several driving modes, which I've talked about in other videos. But if you put the car into B, it adds maximum regeneration. And that means you've essentially got one pedal driving for most of your driving. So when you put your foot down, the car goes forward. When you ease off the accelerator, there's some heavy regen going on, surprisingly heavy, more so than in the ID3. And it brings the car to a stop, or nearly to a stop. So let's move on to the things we're less happy about. And these are all kind of first world problem things. So number one is there's no auto lock. So if you leave the car and forget to lock the car, it just stays unlocked. And I think this is probably like most cars, but a lot of the cars I've had lately, when you get out and walk away, as long as the keys aren't in the car, it just locks itself, so you don't have to remember. I wish the e-Golf, and I think it does in the US maybe, let me know if you know, would have auto lock. It's such a good feature. The next thing is the wheel spin. So I quite like this feature because it makes me giggle. Because when you're on a wet road, for instance, and you're pulling out a T-junction, you can't really go hard on the accelerator because the front wheels just start spinning. In fact, on a really wet road at 30, just over 30 miles an hour, I floored the car and they started spinning then. I think this is down to a lot of power going to the front wheels and also probably a poor tyre choice from Volkswagen for an electric vehicle, because a few people I know have changed the front tyres or the tyres on their e-Golf and solved this problem. So if this is an issue for you, then you should be able to get around it by being not so lead-footed obviously, but also perhaps changing the tyres. The next thing the e-Golf lacks is a frunk. Now, when you look under, we don't go under the bonnet much of the e-Golf, but when you do go under there, not only does it look like I've made it, it has been put together in a bit of a hodgepodge way. But it would be nice if there was a tray there for you to put your charging cables. Because if you've got a boot full of stuff and you need to charge when you're out, you've then got to navigate all the stuff that's in the boot to get underneath the lid to get the charging cables out. The other thing the e-Golf suffers with is a lying temperature gauge. It's almost like the temperature gauge was made by a politician. Because if you want it to be, say, 22 degrees in the car, you have to turn it up to about 25 or 26. So it's not a huge issue, but how did Volkswagen get that so wrong? Sure, I've not had a car in the last 20 years with such an inaccurate temperature gauge. The last thing, and the most annoying for me, is you can't have the heated mirrors on at the same time as having the mirrors dip when you put the car into reverse. So, I mean, these are all first world problems, aren't they? But that's such a design flaw, I think, that in the winter, if you want the heated mirrors on, you can't have the mirrors dip in reverse. Who put that there? Who made that so it doesn't work? It's ridiculous. So what is the e-Golf like to live with on a day-to-day basis? And I wanted to wait a couple of years before making this review. I've got quite a few e-Golf videos because I didn't want to be one of those people who just buy a car and then sit there going rah, rah, rah about it, because almost like some sort of confirmation bias. They need to justify their purchase. I know I've been there. I had a Tesla when I first got my Tesla. Sorry about that. That was the postman. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so that's about right. I remember when I used to get first post at about 6:30 and then second post. I'm showing my age. Anyway, so I didn't want to be in that stage where we're new owners of the car. So after 22,000 miles, I can honestly say, and this isn't a sponsored video, I don't care if you buy a Volkswagen e-Golf or not, I can honestly say it's been an amazing car. We recently had 2 ID3s, so I hired 2 different ID3s, I had one for a month and then one for a week, different specs. And after 1,200 miles in these cars, thinking that they would be the natural progression for us, thinking we would go from the e-Golf into the ID3s, I phoned up Volkswagen Financial Services and said, can we just keep the e-Golf another year, please? Which they were really helpful with. And if you've got an e-Golf and it's due to go back and you want to keep it and it's leased like ours is, phone up Volkswagen Financial Services. They looked at it for us, they re-quoted us, they took the lease payment from £230 a month down to 190. And a lot of that's down to the fact that they now know what the second-hand values are more on EVs and e-Golfs, and they're worth a lot more than they thought they would be. One thing we really love about the e-Golf, and this is very similar to the ID3, is that it's just as much at home on a country road as it is in a city centre, as it is in a multi-storey car park, as it is on a 4-lane motorway. There's so much versatility with the e-Golf. It's really surprising how good it is in all driving conditions. And as I've mentioned, it's a lot more fun to drive than an ID3. I'm sorry if you're an ID3 fan, I do like them. If you're thinking about buying an e-Golf, or any EV for that matter, then charging and range are probably the two of the questions that you want answered. Let's start with charging. When it comes to home charging, we use a wall connector. Some people call these home chargers. And what that does is that charges the car at just over 7 kilowatts. Because I live in the UK, we have one phase electricity, one electricity going into the car, and that's the most speed, most electricity you can put into the car. So that means when they're sitting on the drive next to each other, the Tesla and the e-Golf charge at exactly the same speed. And this adds around 25 miles of range per hour to the car. It could be a little bit higher, could be a little bit lower, and that's fine for us. It gets plugged in when we get home, and we come onto that cheap tariff at midnight, 12:30. The car then charges, and then it's full for the morning. You can also charge electric vehicles off of a 3-pin plug, but you're probably going to be looking at adding 7, 8 or 9 miles an hour doing it that way, which is good if you're in a holiday home, for instance, and you've got an outside plug, or if you're a friend or family members. But I mean, for most people, I think that's probably enough, but a home charger, if you've got one, is more convenient. Where the e-Golf does fall behind slightly with more modern EVs is when you're out charging and you want to use rapid charging. So these are these high-powered chargers that you see in the motorways and around town and places like that. So they will charge a car dependent on how fast the car can actually take the charge in many cases. So with an e-Golf, it can take 40 kilowatts. And what that means is whether you stick it on one of the brand new 350 kilowatt chargers that are really expensive, or a cheaper 50 kilowatt charger, the 350 kilowatt charger is up to 7 times faster, but because the e-Golf can only take 40, you might as well stick it on the cheaper charger because you're not going to get more than 40 whichever you use. And also with other EV drivers, if there's a choice, I would say it's good etiquette to put your car on the slower charger if it's available, because that frees up the other charger for, say, somebody in a different EV that can take more charge. Most of the time our e-Golf doesn't do more than 60 or 70 miles in a day, so well in excess of 95% of our charging is done at home. But my wife does make 4 trips up north a year, about 250-mile round trip to the north of England. Hey up, kid. And please don't shoot me. She takes her 80-year-old mother, and what they do is they stop for a coffee at a Starbucks on the A1 where there's 4 Instavolt chargers, have a coffee and a chat, carry on their journey, and on the way back they do the same thing. I think they quite enjoy the stop halfway up and halfway down. So on long journeys, I mean, it's really easy with the e-Golf, even though it doesn't charge as fast as some other cars. How often are you going to be charging it away from your home? When we do, my wife favours Instavolt. If you've not used an Instavolt charger, since the day they came out, they've all been tap and go. Even the older ones are tap and go. They're very easy to use. You've got an app, so before you set off, if there's a bank of 4 halfway through your journey, your passenger can quickly check how many are available before you even get there, so you can decide if you're even going to stop there or not. If you're new to all of this, Instavolt are a really good charging network. Next is range. So Volkswagen claim you'll get 120 miles from the e-Golf from a full battery, and I'd say that's pretty accurate. So in the spring and also the autumn, that's what our range is, approximately 120 miles on a full charge. However, that does change in the summer and in the winter. So in the summer, in ideal conditions, so t-shirt and shorts weather, just me and my wife in the car, I just got to 140 miles, about 138 miles, which I was pleased with. However, the flip side of that is when it's -0 and there's snow or frost on the ground, that range can drop down as low as 90. And when I'm quoting these figures, that's on a full battery. So for longer journeys, you would just fill the car up and drive away. For day-to-day driving, Volkswagen recommend charging the battery to 80% to help with long-term battery health. We find that that's fine in the summer. However, in the winter, on weekdays, we do charge the car to 90%, and just to make sure we've got enough range because it's reduced. Over the 22,000 miles in 2 years, we haven't seen any sort of reduction in range. if we have, and we're not really measuring it, it's been minimal. At the moment, we're looking at our next car, so this might be helpful if you're thinking of something similar. One car that my wife decided she didn't want to drive on a daily basis was the ID3. So what I've been researching is cars around that size. So it's so hard to find a Volkswagen e-Golf sized EV. So I looked at the Peugeot's E208, really nice car, but just a little bit too small in the back. I looked at a Tesla Model 3 for her, but she wants something more traditional. So I spent ages researching these cars thinking it's got to be the Cupra Born, because that's similar dimensions and it's got a little bit more of a fun driving profile perhaps than an ID3. However, she saw a Kia e-Niro and said, I want that one. So all that research, and she's going to have a Kia e-Niro. So we're going to wait until the new one comes out in a few months. We've spoken to our local Kia dealership. They seem to think the third quarter of 2022. So watch this space, and we'll have a Kia e-Niro if things go to plan, hopefully soon. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. Until next time, see you soon.